Before Van Damme actually got involved in the underground fighting ring in Lionheart, he actually faces off against martial arts great Billy Blanks as well as a couple other Legionnaires during his daring escape. Billy Blanks would go on to star in quite a few straight-to-video martial arts flicks after Lionheart, such as Talons of the Eagle, Showdown, TC 2000, and Back in Action. I actually seen all these films growing up. The quality wasn't nearly as good as Lionheart, and I never revisited them since. But it was a time when I was just obsessed with martial arts training as well as movies, and I enjoyed them for what they were. Let me know if you've seen any of those Billy Blanks movies, by the way, and what you think of them. But as far as Billy Blanks goes, he really went mainstream with his Taibo training system, which incorporated aerobics exercises with martial arts techniques. It became quite a pop culture phenomenon in the late 1990s. One of the other Legionnaires Van Damme fought in that sequence, and someone who would have a larger role in the film as he'd be one of the men to bring Van Damme back from America, would be his good friend Michel Qissi. He's appeared in several Van Damme films, most notably as Tong Po in Kickboxer, a role he would reprise in the follow-ups against Sasha Mitchell in Kickboxer 2 and 3. You may also recognize him as a guy from Bloodsport who Bolo Young does it worse than just sweep the leg, move on. Another martial arts great who appeared in the film, though with a much smaller role, if you can even call it a role, was Kenpo master Jeff Speakman playing Mansion Security Man during the final fight. Shortly after Lionheart, he would star as a lead in The Perfect Weapon. Paramount Films was looking for their own action martial arts star after Jean-Claude Van Damme and Steven Seagal proved to be big hits with audiences. Make sure to check out my video on Jeff Speakman, by the way, to get more insight to that whole thing, linked in the description below. The interesting thing with Lionheart is that we had several martial arts masters in the film, but none of them played as one of the fighters that Van Damme was pitted against in the underground fighting circuit. But as you'll soon find out, the men who did play these fighters all had pretty impressive backgrounds themselves. They actually auditioned 1,000 people at Frank Dux' gym in order to fill these roles. Frank Dux, by the way, was also one of the fight choreographers on the film. So this first guy Van Damme fights is credited as the New York Monster Fighter. He's played by James Brewster Thompson. I've always just remembered him as the first guy Van Damme beat, the one he got a flawless victory against. Unlike other of the fighters in Lionheart, he didn't land one punch against Van Damme, which I guess makes sense because this is not a high-level fight, rather one of those ones Joshua describes as
fight for winos and junkies.
So James Brewster Thompson is actually a pretty interesting guy, and after doing research for this video and finding out more about him, I actually have a lot of respect for him. He started judo at the YMCA at the age of 13, stating that when he got his first lesson in judo at a YMCA camp for young kids, the camp had weightlifting, archery, boxing, judo, and arts and crafts. And judo was the only activity that he could do well enough to win points for his cabin and several boys, and he ended up becoming a judo champion for his weight division that week. He didn't do judo again, at least not formally in a dojo after that week, until he was 21 years old, but he learned 2 throws at that camp that he would continue to practice and use on his friends from 13 years old until he was 21. He received his black belt in 10.5 months' time, which is a record in California and perhaps the whole United States. It kind of reminds me of that Bruce Lee quote, "I fear not the man who has practiced 10,000 kicks once, but I fear the man who has practiced one kick 10,000 times." It really points out the importance of focused practice and a high level of proficiency. I'm pretty sure he was really amazing at those 2 throws. Now, usually it takes 2 to 5 years for one to earn their black belt in judo, and he's since become a 5th degree black belt, earning all 5 degrees from competition. His black belt is actually registered through the Kodokan in Japan, unlike judo Jean LaBelle's, at least according to Steven Seagal.
Jean LaBelle calls himself Judo Jean LaBelle. We had experts look in every Kodokan, Budokan, Judo Kai, everywhere to see if this guy had one black belt. We couldn't find one.
But going back to James Brewster Thompson, in 2005 he placed 6th place in the Amateur Sumo World Games at 52 years of age. He was by far the oldest one in competition, fighting kids in their 20s and 30s. In 2008, he became the oldest American to ever fight with kids in the Olympic trials for judo. He was 55 years old at the time. He's still at it physically. Here he is at age 65 in early 2019 doing push-ups on his fingers. This was during a school assembly in Salinas, California, where he grew up. He explained to the kids that his time at that school proved pivotal for where he wanted to go in life. He said in 8th grade he could go one of 2 ways, focus on his school and grades or hang out with the wrong people. He of course chose the former. Now he's a big advocate of staying healthy and drug-free and tries to pass that message along, especially to kids. He's become a bit of a celebrity, having appeared in multiple movies, including a prominent role in the 1989 Japanese film Gunhead, which he followed up with Lionheart. It's really his feats of strength and ventriloquism act, though, that got him a lot of national recognition, as he would make appearances on the Arsenio Hall Show, Late Night with David Letterman, and even the White House on 2 separate occasions. One such feat of strength is his ability to jump rope with people on his back. So the next fighter, Sonny, was the guy that pretty much got what he deserved. They had choreographed an entire fight scene, however Van Damme had an idea to make it just one punch, which I think worked better in the film. It was definitely more memorable. The character Sonny is played by Jeff Langton, who has a pretty extensive background in boxing as well as Taekwondo. He became an amateur boxer and California State Taekwondo champion. He was also the first and original member of the world-famous Ernie Reyes West Coast demo team, and it was Jeff who introduced gymnastics and acrobatics to martial arts demonstration. No wonder Cynthia from Lionheart liked him. He's actually been in quite a few films both as an actor and as a stuntman. Some of the more notable ones where he did stunt work were on Cobra, Rambo 3, and Van Damme Street Fighter. He also played a boxer in Rocky V, but it'd be the low-budget straight-to-video movies where he'd get more on-screen time, such as the Lorenzo Lamas movie Final Impact, which did a good job at showcasing his kickboxing skills. He's also a professional boxing trainer, cornerman and cutman, and actually owns his own private gym for professional boxers and celebrities.
Let's do lunch sometime.
Speaking of lunch, here he is more recently in 2018 having lunch with Sheldon Lettich as well as the character Taylor and Tong Po from Kickboxer. Everyone knows this guy as the Kilt Man. It was actually Van Damme's idea to have him wear the kilt, which is great because it led to classic lines like this.
Man, get on the damn skirt. Pull up his dress. I'd like to see if you got any drawers on.
The character is definitely more memorable as a result. The actor that played him is Stuart F. Wilson.
I have never met a normal guy named Stuart.
Oh, okay.
As far as movies go, he's had some small roles in a few films, such as a henchman in the 2003 rock movie The Rundown. He's also played the cowboy character who took a vicious beating from Bob Sapp in the 2009 Michael J. White film Blood and Bone, which is sort of like Michael J. White's Lionheart. Stuart Wilson primarily does stunt work though, both as a coordinator and or stuntman. He actually gets quite a bit of work because he's Bruce Willis's stunt double, so pretty much any movie Bruce Willis does, he'll do as well, even up to this day. As far as martial arts go, he's got a pretty impressive background. In 1986, he was the AAU light heavyweight kickboxing champion. He's also an associate instructor for Progressive Fighting Systems Incorporated and trains Navy SEALs. So the racquetball court guy was played by Magic Schwartz, nicknamed the Magician. You'd likely recognize him from the Sylvester Stallone arm wrestling movie Over the Top, where he played Smasher.
I'm the Smasher. It's a nice name.
Now here's some interesting trivia about him. In 1979, he was a first personal trainer at the world-famous Gold's Gym in Venice Beach, California. There he would train several professional athletes and Hollywood actors while pursuing his own bodybuilding career. Here he is prior to that in 1973 at the Mr. San Antonio Championships, and another bodybuilding pic of him at the Mr. South Texas Championship. But outside of bodybuilding, what he's most known for would be his wrestling career, which ran from 1983 to 1990 in several different federations, including the WWF, which has since been called the WWE since 2002. He also designs and builds custom Harley-Davidson motorcycles and has owned and operated 4 custom motorcycle shops. A lot of you probably refer to this next guy as the Pool Guy or even Tarzan, and this was definitely an interesting fight in the film. As far as a venue goes, that was Sheldon Lettich's idea to use that partially full swimming pool. The actor portraying him was Paco Prito, who began training in martial arts at the age of 6. He's a black belt in Shotokan Karate, which is the same style of karate that Van Damme trained in at a young age. In the early 1980s, Paco instructed martial arts classes at East Los Angeles College. He even created his own system of teaching martial arts, incorporating various techniques and self-awareness called PACO, P-A-C-O, an acronym for Physical Awareness Concerning Others, where he teaches Tai Chi, Qigong, kickboxing, and boxing. I'd imagine he has training in capoeira as well, as some of those techniques were demonstrated here in Lionheart. But he'd go on to demonstrate a lot more in Sheldon Lettich's directed film Only the Strong, where he played the main villain Silverio opposite Mark Dacascos. I always felt Paco had good screen presence and should have got a lot more work. After Only the Strong, he would appear opposite Canadian martial arts sensation Jeff Wincott in the straight-to-video film Street Law, where Wincott played a martial arts-trained lawyer forced to fight in illicit matches after he's framed for a crime. With a plot like that, it's no wonder it went straight to video. So here's a thing that sucks for Paco Prito, by the way, and it's the same thing that sucked for Mark Dacascos as well as director Sheldon Lettich. Only the Strong tested extremely well with live audiences, and Fox studio executives were very high on the movie and they were eager to promote it. The 3 men, Paco, Sheldon, and Mark, were set to do a 3-week promotional tour in 12 cities across the US, but Mark Dacascos got stuck shooting the film Double Dragon, which went weeks and weeks beyond its scheduled production. So the tour had to be postponed and then postponed again before finally being canceled altogether. Had word gotten out via the promotional tour, it's very likely that Only the Strong would have been a much bigger hit. This would have greatly benefited all 3 men. I personally didn't even know Only the Strong was in the theater at the time. I only found out about it later after it was on video from an associate in middle school who claimed it was the best martial arts movie ever. Upon seeing it, I was duly impressed. So this mutton chop's cat-loving baddie Attila was played by Abdel Qissi, who is Michelle Qissi's older brother. Van Damme grew up with them in his native Brussels, Belgium. Abdel trained in boxing at a sports center where he met Van Damme. His large, imposing stature, standing 6'2" with the stocky build, visually made him a formidable opponent opposite Van Damme in 2 other movies outside of Lionheart. In 1996's The Quest, he played the Mongolian fighter, who was a final opponent Van Damme had to face in the tournament. He would follow that up years later in a much smaller role in 2001's The Order, which, like Lionheart, was directed by Sheldon Lettich. Abdel Qissi did box professionally in the early 1980s. His career consisted of 8 fights, 5 of them wins, 2 via knockout, 1 a draw, and 2 losses. So here's some other notable guys I want to point out in the film, who didn't really have much of a role, but were pretty accomplished in the world of martial arts and fighting. The late Stefanos Miltsakakis, who passed away in 2019. I previously talked about him in my Maximum Risk video. I'll link it in the description below if you want to check that out. He's a pretty accomplished wrestler, and at the age of 24 was selected for the Greek team at the 1984 Olympics, but a knee injury unfortunately sidelined him, forcing him to abandon his Olympic dreams. He did later end up becoming a world champion in Pagration, an ancient Greek sport combining wrestling and boxing. He also has 2 wins in Valtudo champion events, both in 1999 as well as 2002. You probably recognize him in quite a few Van Damme movies, outside of the guy driving the Jeep in Lionheart.
So it's been out in the sun too long, man.
He appeared in Cyborg, The Quest, Maximum Risk, and Derailed. Some other notable films he appeared in were Best of the Best 2, where he fought Philip Ree, and Bloodsport 4, The Dark Kumite, where he fought Daniel Bernhardt. That movie might actually be worse than Derailed. That's a tough one. Let me know what you guys think. That is, if you fell victim to watching them both like I did. This garage fighter Sonny beat up, Tony Satch Williams, is pretty involved in the martial arts community and competed in karate tournaments. He's actually a Kaju Kenpo martial arts specialist and world champion. Kaju Kenpo is really the foundation that Mark Dacascos has as a martial artist. His father, Al Dacascos, founded a style of Kaju Kenpo called Wan Hap Kyun Do, which incorporated Chinese and Filipino martial arts into the traditional Kaju Kenpo system. Make sure to check out my Mark Dacascos video. I talk all about that, and I'll link it in the description below. But going back to Tony Satch Williams, he did sadly pass away at the age of 50 from a heart attack in 2011. There's an article from a guy who had a match against him and posted that footage. I'll link it in the description below if you want to check that out. There's also a tribute someone made on YouTube for Stefanos Miltsakakis as well, and I'll link that in the description too. So this buff gang member was played by Thunderwolf. That's really his name, Thunderwolf. Blink and you'll miss him, so I'll pause the video. Like Van Damme, he started training in Shotokan Karate as well, then later took up kickboxing and ended up having 12 pro fights. His last fight was a loss against Denis Alexia, who was a heavyweight champion kickboxer and played Van Damme's brother in the original Kickboxer film. Denis Alexia had a tremendous record, by the way. 70 wins and 2 losses, 65 wins by knockout. No wonder his nickname was the Terminator. You can see a lot more of Thunderwolf in the film Shoot Fighter with William Zabka, the guy that played Johnny Lawrence in The Karate Kid. In that film, Thunderwolf plays a sword-wielding character named Hawk. If you ever wondered what happened between Johnny Lawrence and his sensei John Kreese between the events of The Karate Kid and the new series Cobra Kai, it's all right here in Shoot Fighter. Johnny was fighting in illegal matches to the death in Mexico, and Kreese was still dishing out his bad advice. Only this time, it was far more extreme than his sweep the leg days. Here's a watered-down John Kreese in the 1980s.
Sweep the leg. You have a problem with that?
Compare that to an off-the-rails John Kreese in the 1990s.
Finish him.
He's defenseless.
But he still lives. And he would fight again.